Hey you, watching this video, spread love.
Hey familia, today's video is sponsored by YouTube Memberships. YouTube Memberships allows you to partner up with your favorite YouTubers and gain access to all kinds of perks. To become a member, click the join button below. Familia, bienvenidos and welcome back to another Tower of Torres podcast. I am your host, Leonardo Torres.
I'm Erika Ayala.
And together we are Leonardo. Yeah. You know the drill. You guys came up with that mashup name and we love it. And it's staying, it's sticking. Let us know where you're watching from. We have Eric Davis in the house, Jay Lena in the house, Linda in the house, Angela in the house. Who else we got? David on here. Thank you so much for joining us. We have, and Roxana's in the house, and Jackie also in the house. We have a very especially delicious podcast today. We listened to this gentleman's music last week, and that one particular song, we already know which one it is, Milk and Honey.
Milk and Honey.
It was like milk and honey to my ears. it was tacos to my ear, right?
Yeah.
And I got a chance to talk to this gentleman a few days ago, and he's awesome. He's awesome. You guys are gonna love it. But before we get into our conversation with him, I just wanted to. Sorry, I got to multitask here because this came off of my screen again. Here we go. There it is. Can we see it? There it is. We can see it. All right. Special thank you to our YouTube members for supporting this channel. Without you, conversations like this would not be possible, and our Patreon partners as well. Thank you so much for your continuing support of this channel. Here's a couple of things that I know about this gentleman, but we're gonna get to know him a little bit more. He is a Christian independent singer-songwriter, and he likes to sing testimonies of God's handwork. His album, his 10-track LP, One Day, and his single Milk and Honey, which I absolutely love, are available on all major platforms, including his website. The link is in the description down below. And familia, without further delay, please help me welcome el señor Tony Serge. Welcome, señor.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
You're very welcome.
We appreciate that you took the time to join us for this conversation.
Of course.
We had, as you know, we listened to your songs a few days ago, last week, right? Last week. And this song, Milk and Honey, man.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. I don't even know what to say about it, man. It's great. I don't think any kind words will do it justice, man. But we loved it. We absolutely loved it. But before we get into to those types of questions, to into your music and your background, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and who you are for those people who may not know?
Sure. Yeah. So I am on the East Coast. I was born into a Christian family, which I'm very grateful for, and I saw my parents from a very young age live out their faith. I knew what it was like to watch my parents live their faith, both in publicly and in home also. And I remember from a very young age just accepting the Lord into my life, accepting Jesus as my Savior, a very young age. And I think over the course of my life, he's just revealed himself in new ways, more powerful ways. And it's just been a process of crafting me all throughout the course of my life, and just and changing me and bringing to light things that I needed to change about myself, areas that he wanted me to grow in, things he wanted me to let go of and trust him more. So so I was born into that kind of an environment, and I also have my dad was a traveling music evangelist, so I was kind of around music my whole life, my whole upbringing, but also a pretty shy kid. I didn't love being in front of groups of people or anything, and so I would just kind of sing. I would sing in my parents' basement when I was little, and I have a younger sister. She was probably the only audience I had for many, many years. And, I just watched a lot of kids programming and stuff growing up as a teenager and stuff like that, watching kids programming that was like involved with music and things like that. And I think I kind of trained under them for a long time, just sort of practicing how they did it, practicing singing, all of that. So I think I was kind of born to be a singer, and it really wasn't until, probably 15 years ago that I started actually doing it in front of people. So that's like a short, probably a short story.
I love it. It's so much in that tiny little basket that you just explained. So your father was a music evangelist?
Yeah. So what does that mean? Yeah. So what he would do is he had a regular job through the week, and then on weekends so we're talking like the 90s right now, pretty much the entirety of the 90s. He would travel to different churches, different ministries, things like that, bringing the gospel of Jesus, but he would do it through music. So it was kind of like, if you look at churches now, most times you've got a worship band, a worship leader, or pastor up on the stage. But back in the 90s, that really wasn't the case. That's definitely more of a modern thing. So he would sort of take that role, just sort of once and done at different churches within multiple different states on here on the East Coast. So,
okay, and that was back in the 90s.
Yeah, mostly through the 90s.
This is the first time I've ever heard of a music evangelist, and so that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about your musical background? Like, how did you come to music? Because you said you got into it about 15 years ago. How did that start?
It was kind of one of those things where people who knew me well knew I loved to sing, but really didn't do it in front of anybody. And it wasn't until there was a spot open kind of urgently for a singer on a worship team for the church that I was just becoming part of, and it was something that needed to be filled like immediately. And it was really like the pushing of my mom, who said, "You love to sing, you love to sing harmonies, you love to sing background vocals, do it. You've got to do this. And she just kind of pushed me, and the decision had to be made so quickly that there really wasn't any time to weigh it out. So I did it, made this worship team, and then one thing kind of happened after the other. So
shout out to mom for encouraging.
Shout out to mom and dad, who are probably both watching right now if they got their computer to work properly.
That's great, man. And what would you say is like one of the biggest things that you learned in the beginning, taking on that role for the very first time?
Oh my goodness. Being part of a worship team is really, really an incredible experience. There's so much you get to learn about. If we're just talking music for a minute here, there's so much to learn about how songs are crafted, how what instruments are truly necessary to make the song come alive, to make it come together, which ones you can do without and still have a song that is that's doable. Like if you don't have drums, can you still do this song, kind of thing. So you learn how to be really resourceful, because most times in local churches and things like that, they don't have all of the resources that larger organizations have. So you've got to kind of work with what you've got. You've got to work with the talent that you've got, for better or worse. And it's just kind of always a learning process. Like, okay, this person that we have this weekend might not be as talented as this other person. So how do we adapt that we can still do this well for the Lord? And then there's the whole spiritual aspect, which would encompass the entire interview right now. There's so much. And I think it's one of those things where you learn how quickly it can start to become about you. and it's just a constant battle of refocusing your attention onto the Lord, because I think it's just, once there's a microphone in your hand and you get a taste of people going, "Oh, I love when you sing that song. I love when you sing that song." If you don't keep it focused on the Lord, it can really very quickly become all about you. And that's something that you always have to keep in check, because you're part of the team. And if they're all doing the same thing, it all can very quickly become about the individual. And so that's just one of the main challenges, I would say, is just keeping it focused and directed on the one we're worshiping.
Yeah. There's someone maybe listening to this who might think, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with it being a little bit about me, because God gave me this gift to sing or to perform or to play. So what's wrong with that? What would you say? Well,
if you're familiar with the Word of God, it's very clear on what pride can do, the damage that pride can inflict on your life. And I think one of the biggest problems with that is when it becomes about you, then as soon as it becomes about you, it's no longer about the Lord. And the Bible's also very clear on what the Lord thinks of anything else that takes his place, anything that's an idol. And you can very quickly become your own idol. And I can tell you right now, I mean, just because I had the Christian upbringing and all that does not mean I've led a perfect life by any stretch of the imagination. And I know me, and I'm not worth worshiping. So that's probably the all of it wrap up.
I get it. I totally get it. What system do you have in place that keeps you sort of in check? You know,
very honest. Very honest accountability. I have between my family and friends who are family to me, just within those that I fellowship with. I have some very, very honest people in my life that have hit me between the eyes before with some very, very difficult truths that I needed to hear. And for me, they're very important to keep around for so many reasons, and that being one of them.
And can you tell me at what point did you transition from singing in a worship band to starting to write your own music, or to wanting to?
Yeah, it sort of happened at the same time. I've always had an interest in songwriting. It's really fascinated me even before I really knew much about how things were made, how things are produced, decisions that you have to make, all that kind of stuff with the actual building out of a track. I just was really interested in the songwriting process. And I think I've been writing for plenty of years. And I mean, it would be a disaster. Let's just say this: if anybody ever got a hold of my iPhone, because there's voice memo, unlabeled voice memo after voice memo of me just humming something like completely absurd into my phone just to remember it later. And I would say once I really started getting a knack of how worship songs were put together, I thought, I think it's time for me to try doing this. So I would say probably only a few years into being part of a worship team, I had the interest in making my own music. But then it wasn't until probably about 5 years ago that I started getting much more serious about it.
And when you approach a song, so you say you recorded, you hum, does it usually start with a melody, or do you start with lyrics and then add a melody to it? How do you approach it?
It's always different. And I was kind of afraid you were going to ask me that question because I don't have a great answer for you, because it's always a little bit different. Sometimes you'll just hear something. You'll hear something that's both the lyric and the melody at the exact same time, and it might just be a hook where you're just saying a phrase. You're singing a phrase, and that's all it exists as, just that melody of that phrase. And then from there, if you can't get it out of your head, then typically it's something worth building on top of. I mean, that's one way of doing it, but I'll tell you, in the songs that I've released so far, I would say every single one of them has come from a completely different direction, a different approach.
Oh, that's cool. It keeps things interesting, man.
It sure does. Yeah.
How long has a song or a melody been stuck in your head before it actually turned into a song?
A frustratingly long time. Seriously, I did over the course of the first album that I released, there were probably several on there that were just sort of stuck in limbo for a little while, where I had a hook, or I had a chorus or something like that, and I just, for the life of me, could not build it out beyond that. And what's interesting though is, I mean, and this might be somewhat of a segue, but because of the fact that I really feel called to sing testimonies, these songs are each testimonies. And I think what was interesting was there would be some times where I felt the Lord would give me a piece of it, and it wasn't until he brought me through something further along down the road that I realized that was the piece that I was missing in order to build the lyrics for the rest of the song. Like, yes, he gave me a taste of it here, but I had to go through something until I was able to kind of put those two puzzle pieces together.
Okay. All right. That is an interesting segue, actually, because I do want to talk about the song Milk and Honey. But before I get to that, I want to know, like, how would you describe your relationship with God?
Oh my goodness. I would hope to say that it's always being challenged. It's growing to be more like him. It's growing to change things, just growing, changing, and it's trying to become more focused on him, more like him. Like I said in the beginning, just over the course of my life, there are things that I felt that I knew about him that he deepens as I get to know him more. And I'm not a person who loves to read. You will not find like a library of books in my house. It's just not something I enjoy. But reading his word is so important, and I try to keep on task with being led by him and reading his word, because though it's in there that you really discover what his love really means. I know you talk an awful lot about God's love, and there are just so many facets. I actually just was in my home church. We actually just talked about going beyond what it looks like beyond God's love. Like just that love that makes you feel so good. There's so many more facets to his love that just mold you and shape you and cause you to change things about yourself that you thought maybe were really good things, and that you realize later, that's not in line with him. That's not in line with his direction, his leading, his word. So I would just say it's always growing. It's always, hopefully, it's always deepening. That I'm always becoming more like him.
When you say that you want to be more like him, what does that look like to you? Like, what is it? Or is there one particular thing that you hold on to that you focus on and you're moving in that direction?
I don't know if that there's one specific thing that I'm focused on. I think it's more just using Christ as an example in life. I mean, there are so many lessons that you can unpack from the word by reading it. And there are just certain days where you read one passage and maybe you get some sort of historical fact out of it that one day, and it doesn't really, penetrate your heart that day. And then the very next day you can read the same passage, and whatever you're going through or whatever you're experiencing in that moment, it impacts you so differently toward him. And I think I think one of those things is just being, I should say too, like back to your previous question, just becoming more obedient to him. Again, like less about me, more about him. Like what does he want me to do with my life? And I think just using Christ as an example is just his obedience to the Heavenly Father. He was always obedient to God, even unto death. And that obedience is key, and it's not easy. I think it goes against our very nature. I don't want to be obedient to something else that says like this is the way you must do this. But the more you learn about him, the more you grow in your walk with him, you realize that all of those things that he wants, even if they're uncomfortable to you, it's out of his love. So I think, like I said, just using Christ as an example of obedience to the Heavenly Father.
That's a really great answer, by the way. When approaching, now let's talk about this song, Milk and Honey. Like when approaching this particular song, what was the songwriting process? How did this song first come to you?
Yeah, I'm excited to answer this because I wish there was something so much more profound than the answer.
Oh man, okay.
So
I'm ready.
So my best buddy and I write a lot of the lyrical content together. I do the music and melodies, and he's been a really big catalyst for lyrical content. He'll usually be the one that says a phrase or something that like gets us off in a direction. But we were getting together after I released my first album, and with just the only thing we had in mind was, let's just write music. Let's see what we can get in an afternoon of time spent together. And what we were doing was we said, like, there are no real rules other than let's make it either a worship song or a testimony song. But what we did was we would ask his wife before we started the process, okay, give us a word to work off of. So sometimes she would just say the word baptism, or she'd say the word joy, or something like that. And what we agreed upon was she'd give us that word. We wouldn't know it ahead of time. And then it was like, then we were out of the gate. And so she gave us the term hunger and thirst this one particular day. And I actually am familiar with a really beautiful song that's called Hunger and Thirst already. And I thought, let's those are terms that we often hear in, you know, just the Christian world. And I said, why don't we focus it on something specific, a specific type of food and drink? And the Lord just led us to milk and honey, and we sat in this very office right here, and I was plunking away on my keyboard, and my buddy sat on my couch that's right over here. And what he'll typically do, we're like really quiet at first. We don't really talk to one another. I'll just start noodling things on the piano, and he just out of the gate is a very, very gifted writer, and he can just start writing content. So I've got an iPad here. He would have his Chromebook. We'd both be sharing the same Google Doc, and I'd be watching the writing come up as he's typing it. But I would kind of get lost in the music for a little bit. And then all of a sudden I'd look up and there'd be this entire page worth of content for me to look at. And then I just kind of like quickly scan it, lock in on something. And I wish I could remember all the details and the specifics of that day, but it just was an absolute blur to me. And I think we probably wrote that song start to finish in probably an hour and a half or 2 hours. Yeah. And in fact,
that's interesting.
And not all of that was probably the quickest of any of the music that I've released so far. That was probably the quickest from start to finish. And just like little nugget of info here, me singing on the final Milk and Honey track is like my very first and second time singing it ever. Like really? I recorded it that afternoon. What we would typically do is I'd record it on my phone first, and then he'd go home and then he'd bug me and be like, you get me a demo. So just to get him off my back, I would typically like immediately put it down. Like he'd leave my house and I would immediately put it down, just like plunking away on the piano, and I would sing it. Well, for whatever reason, that day, I don't know. I just like, it just had connected to me so quickly, and put it down. And I kid you not, it was maybe 1.5 takes. And and just used like one piece from the first take, and that's it. You know, and that's, like I said, that's not the way that it normally goes, but it was the way that it went that day. And then I went back and re-recorded piano and put like the other portions in it as well. But I was listening to this vocal that I was so familiar with at this point, and you know, Tyler had said the same thing. I was just sort of like, I don't know if I can replicate the rawness that and the heart that I had. I feel like I'd be acting at this point to try to replicate what I had first had. So I thought, well, for better or worse, I think that's what's going on the final track.
Man, that's great. That's a great story, man.
Thank you.
And excellent use of modern technology to write the Google Docs and mess around. Is keyboard your forte?
No, it's not. My voice is.
Your voice.
And I started playing about 3 years ago. I had said to myself, you know, I don't want to be 10 years older than I am right now and regret A, that I didn't release an album, and B that I never learned piano. And I think just having the musical background, I mean, I had taken some guitar lessons years ago, and I was part of like high school choir and things like that. So I was familiar, and I also had some very, very gifted, talented musician friends who spoke music at a time that was like a completely foreign language to me. And I think I just absorbed as much as I could because I was really interested in it. And I think all of that really lent itself to starting an instrument fresh, because I was already familiar with the scale, what a quarter note was, what notes were part of chords, things like that. I had a background in that, and I think just my experiences over life and just all those different touches of music, each sort of gave another piece to that. So my goal was to be able to write songs more quickly, to have an instrument in order to, get ideas out quicker, instead of me, again, just humming something in an iPhone and trying to build something out of that later. So
how long did it take you to, I mean, I know you said you wrote this quick, but how long did it take you to come up with that melody, man? Because that melody for that chorus on Milk and Honey is just, it's something else, man. It's very emotional. It has a lot of emotion behind it, and then plus you're an emotional singer. You can hear that you're feeling the words that you're singing. You're not just singing for the sake of singing,
right?
But how long did it take you to come up with that little melody?
That was in the same amount of time that we wrote it. Wow. I mean, it was lyrics, melody, chords, everything came in about that hour and a half. It was one of those things where it's such a blur. I have a pretty good memory. I can usually recall a lot of very, very unnecessary and intricate details that the people who know me who are watching this right now are laughing because they know exactly what I'm talking about, like an annoying amount of details. But that afternoon, like the time spent during the making of that song is really a blur to me. I truly don't remember the back and forth that we had. I know I originally wrote it. I was writing it in a different key because the song's actually in D flat, which is a tricky key to play in on the piano for somebody who's new to the piano, because it's like all black keys for the most part. But I had written it in a lower key that had more easy to play chords in it, and I know when we were writing it, I said, like, this is the melody, but it's too low for my voice, and I don't feel like I can really bring that passion in a lower register of my voice. I could still sing it there. I just didn't think it had like the punch that it needed. So after he had left, I was sort of toying around with like, all right, where do I take this? And I was like, great, D flat. That's really where this needs to be. And like, all right, thanks a lot, Lord. This is not the trickiest key, not the easiest key to play in. But again, that's even that is a testimony, because I feel like that's a challenge that the Lord gives me. It's like I couldn't shake it. I knew it had to be in that key, and He pushed me to learn it in that key. And it's like, so that's a skill set that I have now that I didn't before. And it's funny because like that's a simple example, but that's a lot of the way that He works. I think sometimes He calls you to do things that are completely out of your comfort zone. They're not in the key that you want to play in. And if you remain obedient to Him, there's quite a lesson to be learned.
Oh, that's hilarious. So, no, that's hilarious, because whenever I grabbed my guitar, and when I used to write some stuff, my go-to was always either that D minor, like just going to that D minor and then like humming something, or E minor and going to that something. But that's interesting, because like it's not always going to be in the key that's comfortable to you. The one that your go-to.
Absolutely not.
So what would you say is one of the biggest lessons that you feel like God has taught you as a musician, or as in your personal life?
Just to continue trusting in Him, really. I think I was encouraged years ago to start keeping a record of the ways that I've seen Him move in my life, whether it was simple or huge, and whether those stories mean anything to you or not. It's just it's a record for me, and a reminder, a rehearsal to look at the works that He's done in my life. So I think there are plenty of times where you get stuck in yourself, as Milk and Honey says, lost in my selfish ways, and where you're just right.
That's my favorite part.
Yep. And you just get so focused. You get so focused on, and I'm totally preaching to myself right now too. But you get so focused on that desert that you feel like you're in, or that island that you feel like you're by yourself, and you just feel You might feel forsaken, but you go back and you look at just all of the things, like these dated entries of ways that he moved in my life, and it's just no denying his presence or his power in my life. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, is just always remember that he did it before, he's continuing to do it right now, and he will do it again in the future. So it's like, no matter what, like I said, no matter what your geographical area looks like, if it's that desert, it's, he still will call you straight home to him, and he will still reveal himself to you in powerful and mighty ways, and ultimately ways that are if you use that properly, can be honoring back to him, so.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great. So, Familia, Tony said he was preaching to himself, but if he was preaching to you, give me some hearts in the live chat, please. If that spoke to you, give me some hearts in the live chat now. So, what advice do you have for someone who may be starting their journey with a worship team, or who is thinking about joining the worship team, but maybe they're not sure if that's for them?
Yeah, I think it's worth it just to try. To see if that's a way that God can use you. And, I think, here's the thing. There's always going to be somebody that's better. And I think for the longest time, I never pursued doing this at all, because I felt like I didn't know enough. I don't know enough about music. I don't know enough about songwriting. Well, I've never done it before. And it's just, there's so many ways that you can get yourself trapped in thinking, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. But if the Lord's calling you to do something, he's going to put into play. He's going to put people in your life. He's going to put resources in your life. If he's calling you to do it and you're obedient to him, he's going to make that path straight for you. So I think if he's calling somebody to be part of a worship team, just try it, and if you don't make that worship team, pray into it, go back, instead of getting mad at whoever's leading it and said no to you, take that to the Lord and share that with the Lord. He's a big God. He can handle you being frustrated and angry over if that's what happened, and take it to him and ask him how he wants, where he wants you to go next. And I know he'll reveal that to you. It might be in a ministry that you weren't even aware of even existed, or needed you to be part. And but for those who do make a worship team, just continue learning. Learn a lot about music. Continue to learn about the Lord. Read his word. Become sanctified by him. Start that process of sanctification if you haven't already, where you're just continuing to be more and more obedient to the Lord, and letting him reveal things to you. And I can promise you, it will fuel your writing. It will fuel your own personal worship toward him. All of that. It'll fuel your capacity to understand what other people are going through, to be able to offer encouragement, correction where it might be necessary, all those things. So yeah, if you're feeling led to do it, let my mom be the mom for everybody and say, just go do it. You want to do it, go do it.
Go do it. Now's your chance.
Yeah.
That's great. Oftentimes we get into something we feel passionate about. We love to do it. And then after a few years of doing it, it sort of becomes either not fun, or we forget, that passion.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for someone who maybe has been involved in the worship team for a really long time, but they lost their love for it, or their passion for it, or they've lost their focus, and they're just showing up, plugging in, playing, and then plugging out and leaving?
Yeah. I don't think there's any problem with taking a rest once in a while. And I've certainly done that. I've certainly taken, sometimes they were things that were out of my control, and sometimes they were things that were in my control. And I decided I need to take a step back for a minute, because my heart's not in the right place. I think it's important to regularly have conversations with the Lord, times of self-reflection where you're saying, am I doing this for the right reasons? Because, like I said earlier in the interview, it very, very, very quickly can become about you, about what you bring, about the talents and the gifts that you have and all of that. And you can really forget to give honor where it's due, honor to the Lord. And I think sometimes it is important to know that sometimes there are seasons of rest. I'm not even part of a worship team right now. And there are days where I really, really miss it. And there are days where I go, no, this is just where the Lord has me right now. I'm in a season right now where I am writing, or a season where I'm creating new stuff. A season where he's led me to places that I hadn't read before in his word with fresh eyes. And just kind of sticking to it, because there is, any musician out there knows that there's a discipline to our craft. You're never going to become better by never picking up your instrument.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing with the Word of God. Like, you're really never going to become better in your walk, deeper in your walk, if you're not invested in that walk at all. So I think it's okay sometimes to take moments of some self-evaluating and going, am I doing this for the Lord? Am I doing this for me? And if you're doing it for the Lord and it's a tricky time, you might have to just keep doing it. Like, being part of a worship team can be really fun. It also could be incredibly frustrating, incredibly challenging. Like, it can tear your heart out sometimes. You're dealing with a group of people that are all bringing different passions to one team, hopefully with one purpose, but a lot of passion in the same room can be a disaster.
Too much fire.
Right? If you've ever been part of a band of any kind, that's an awful lot of passion. Yeah, that can become very destructive very quickly. So I would say also, for people who are part of that, also learn how to forgive. That's a lesson you'll be taught regularly if you're part of any ministry whatsoever. Learn how to forgive.
You remember that you were a beginner once.
Yeah.
Or
you forgot chords.
Or you even aside from the music part, you can remember there have been times that you've said the completely wrong thing, or really hurt somebody, or they've really hurt you, and you might be very justified in that hurt, but that doesn't excuse you from the forgiveness that we're called to do.
I want to ask you a question, and you can choose to be detailed or to opt out of it, but I'm curious to know, like, have you ever struggled with your faith? Because I know you grew up in a Christian home, so you've been around it all your life. But have you ever?
I mean, what's today? Wednesday? Yes, I have. Probably 3 days ago. Probably 7 days before that. It's one of those things where, I did not have the dramatic conversion that some followers of Christ experience in their lives, where they had heart-wrenching childhood, or a very difficult young adulthood that's filled with, like, who knows what, and they're just looking for a savior, and they find and the Lord finds them, and and then it's all joy, and it's all just excitement, like, I'm loved, I never knew this before, I'm forgiven, all of these things. But and I would call that maybe a dramatic conversion. But for me, it was something that I kind of knew my whole life, and I didn't ever step out into other types of faiths, or other types of, worldly religions or anything like that. So there's always a moment where you go, like, am I just full of it? Like, are these people crazy? Am I crazy? But then again, like, you rehearse the mighty acts of God. You can look at his word. You can look at I can look back at the ways in my life, like from childhood well into adulthood, and even right now, the ways that the Lord has protected me, sustained me, provided for me, things that like should not have fallen into place. Things that are not my own doing, like jobs that have literally fallen to me that I wasn't even looking for, like ways that he provided for me in financial difficulty, ways that he protected me when I was in situations that could have been dangerous to me or my faith, ways that he protected my family. It just goes on and on. So I think it's one of those things where I think if followers of Christ really get real with themselves, there are always testings of your faith. I mean, the Bible tells us that there's going to be testing of your faith. But we're also told that it develops perseverance. And I think that's something that, I've had friends over the course of my life that have gone other routes, who've said that they were followers of Christ, and then they've gone completely the opposite direction, and they worship at the altar of something else now. And I've heard them describe it to me, and as much as they try to justify their happiness, it looks like nothing but emptiness to me. I think they can put on a good face and say and try to validate what they believe, but ultimately for me, it's like, I don't want to believe anything else other than you, Jesus. Like, I trust you. You're the only one that's not in your grave. You're the only one that's died for me and died for my sins. And so ultimately that always is what brings me back to him. It's like, again, and I think that's why Milk and Honey is a special song, because it's as special as you've been giving me this encouragement. Like, it's as special to me too. And that was a song that kind of sustained me. I could hear beyond myself, my own voice, when I listened to that song, for the months that it was written before even releasing it to the world. Like, that was one that brought me back, call me straight home. When I'm lost in my selfish ways, all of that, because ultimately, like, when I'm struggling with my faith, it's probably because I'm being very selfish.
Right. Excuse me. I really like that lyric too, man.
Yeah.
And the way that you sing "Call Me Straight Home," it painted a really beautiful image in my mind, about returning. Like, yeah, like here I am doing things my way, wanting to do things my way, looking for the answers in my own way. And it's like, no, I'm lost here. So I don't have the answer. So when I am, call me back home where all the answers are, where everything that I'm searching for is found, where the milk and honey is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's great, man. In what ways would you say that you've been challenged by God, like truly, like really profoundly challenged by God to either stay in your faith?
Oh man.
And then we'll get into Q&A from everyone, so if you all can prepare your questions.
I think a lot of times, I don't know that this is necessarily from, I don't believe this is necessarily from the Lord, but I think what is a major challenge, let's just say this, I think the Lord has allowed me to experience this. I like this testing, I don't necessarily believe is him going like, ha ha ha, gotcha.
Right.
Kind of a thing. There's a lot of difficulty with, so I've been involved with ministry for a very long time, both working in ministry and just being part of different ones. And man, people can be really, really lousy to one another. They can be really pretty crappy. And they can do it under the guise of God, of the Holy Spirit, of Jesus. And man falls short. Man sins. Man hurts one another. And I think over the course of just growing and things like that, I too quickly would assign human traits when they're really letting me down to the Lord. And that's something that I've really had to learn, that like, this isn't just because something crappy is happening right here doesn't mean that the Lord's happy about this, and I can't assign where people have screwed up on who the Lord is. And I think that's something that's really been tested. Just like loving people can be really difficult sometimes. I mean, obviously, we're called to love people. We're called to love one another as our neighbors and things like that. And that's really, really hard some days, and then there are days where I've really screwed up, and it's really, really hard even just to extend that forgiveness to myself, where I feel like I am no good at doing this. I don't have the right words to say. I don't have the right voice to sing this. Who am I that in one breath I can say this about somebody else, and then the next breath, pour my heart out in a song like Milk and Honey, and it's just one of those things where, again, some of the testing of that and some of the learning experience that I've had just in walking with the Lord is just, again, how little I can rely on myself. And once again, like if he's calling me to something, like he can make those paths straight. So I would probably need hours to tell you all the different ways that things have been tested, but that's maybe hopefully a summary of sorts.
It's great. From the main thing that I'm getting from you is that everything that you experience in your life, everything that happens to you in your life, you always bring it back to God and ask, is this right for me? Or how should I approach this? Or what is the lesson in it for me? That's great, man. It's great to have.
Even making difficult decisions. I mean, like there were times that I know the Lord was calling me. I mean, for instance, several years ago, I knew the Lord was calling me out of a job I had. And I've never experienced a peace like that in my life. And I knew it was from him. I knew without a shadow of a doubt it was from him. But I didn't have another job lined up. And, I have a mortgage and I have other bills. And I just was like, this would be crazy if I explained this to anybody else, that wasn't in my immediate circle of the people who knew me, my accountability, my family, all of that. It was an insane situation that I would do this to myself financially. Yet I knew the Lord called me to do it. And I did it, and I walked away, and I was obedient to him. And it was not easy immediately afterward. I mean, like I had to continue going back. I had to continue to go back to him for that peace, to know like that was what you wanted me to do, right? It was what you wanted me to do. And he just continued to just sort of guide me through that and reveal to me, yes, that was what I wanted you to do. And I mean, that was 3 years ago. And even to this day, I think he's still revealing little bits and pieces of why that was something that he called me to do. So
that's great. We have a question by Tyler Robertson. Do you know this person?
Yes,
do you know
I
this
do.
person?
That would be my best friend that wrote Milk and Honey with me.
Awesome.
So.
Tyler, excellent work, man.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Great.
Excellent work. Thank you. He asks,
my wife wants to know if you'll be releasing a Christmas album.
She's really asking for it. I knew that there would be a troll on this chat, and I knew ahead of time that it would be her. I have no current plans to release a Christmas album.
Because it's August, that's why.
Right.
Who's thinking about Christmas?
I saw his question. I'm like, oh, he loves Christmas.
Exactly.
Or Christmas music.
Christmas time, Christmas music, maybe
at some point, if I felt like there was this, I don't know if you guys ever listened to Chris Tomlin's Christmas album. It's really good. There's a lot of original songs on it, and it's neat because they're like Christmas worship. And I mean, there was one year we completely on the worship team completely exhausted that album. I mean, I don't know if there was a song on it that we didn't do. It was really good, and I thought I don't typically love Christmas albums, but that one was one, if I ever headed in any direction, it might be something like that, kind of a contemporary worship plus the sleigh bells. I think, as a musician, if you add sleigh bells to anything, it suddenly becomes a Christmas song. So yeah.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. Christmas bells, and that's it. And maybe a fa la 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 or something like that.
Exactly. Yep.
Let's see. Follow-up question.
For those who have walked longer with Christ but are experiencing a season of desert.
Desert?
Sorry, I have
Dessert sounds good.
What would be your words of encouragement?
Probably supposed to be encouragement, but that would be encroachments.
Encroachments.
Yeah. Okay.
Walk longer with Christ, but are experiencing a season of desert. What would be your words for encouragement? I know he's directing this one toward me because this is something that I've experienced more recently. It's to continue to get in the Word, to continue to get in the Word of God, and just again, like I said before, just rehearsing the acts that he's done in your life and continuing to grow in him, and just read about him, read the other accounts in scripture, because there are plenty of of people that are recorded in the Bible of experiencing many, many highs and lows. And, I think that's something that I try to bring in my music. It's not all a high. There are a lot of difficulties in walking with the Lord, and it's something to just keep walking forward, even if it's in a desert and you see nothing on the horizon but more sand and more sand, just to keep walking toward him. And eventually there's that oasis.
Yeah. And if you see dessert in the desert, don't eat it, because it's
probably
a mirage
by that point. Yeah, or a mirage, exactly.
Yeah.
Somebody asked earlier.
Yeah, I wrote them down the side.
Where's Tony located?
I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm not far from the Allentown area.
And then I saw someone else ask.
Somebody asked.
Someone asked how old you were.
Yeah, Roxana. I wrote it down on the side.
Is that, wait,
I was like, you're 4?
40. 40. Okay, excellent. And you should do a live concert here one day, maybe? Question mark.
Hey, maybe. We'll see. I mean, with the Lord, anything's possible. I love to sing live. I really do. And because you always get something a little different. Yeah. And we'll see. I've got a couple gigs, like local gigs that are coming up that are like benefiting some local ministries that are happening in September and October. And it's been a minute since I've sung in front of an audience, and I have a feeling that will probably light a fire under me again. That it's been too long, because I do really enjoy doing it. So
yeah,
that'd be great.
That's interesting. Yesterday we went to visit her grandmother, and I brought my guitar. Shout out to Barbara out there, Barbara Ayala. But I sang for the first time in a really long time, and my voice was it was struggling.
Yeah, but you did really well. You're hitting some notes that I forgot that you could get it that high. I'm like, whoa, and that long.
The key is passion, right?
Yeah,
my uncle used to say, you don't have to have a great voice. You sing with passion, and you make up for it.
Exactly. I mean, it's just like any other muscle. If you stop using it, you've got to really start conditioning yourself to get back to. And I know that's something that I've lost, like from being part of a worship team that was like a twice a week thing, actually a 3 time a week thing. Your voice just gets so conditioned to singing a lot of stuff for a long amount of time. And that is not a conditioning that I have right now. That and I will probably be humbled very quickly when I do these gigs at just how low my endurance is at that point. But
I feel you on that. And somebody asked here, so hoagies, yeah,
right, yeah, hoagies.
David loves hoagies.
Yeah, good man.
I think I wish
I've got it. I don't really live in a city, and I really should get to a city more often, because that's the only place around here to get a hoagie worth anything. Yeah, just the local gas station hoagies just don't really cut it. No.
I feel in that. I think this is a perfect question to end with, because I always have to know, and I think La Familia already knows where I'm going. Tacos or burritos?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's so unfair. That's really unfair. Do you know? I love making Tex-Mex. Mexican food, like American Mexican food, at home. It's people know I almost always have cilantro and limes in my fridge, and that's really unfair, because I actually will typically do a hard shell taco and wrap it in a soft shell taco. So maybe a little bit of both.
Tacorito, I gotcha.
Tacorito.
Maybe, because here's the thing: if I love burritos, but if I eat them, I usually put something crunchy in them also. Like if I have iceberg lettuce, and sometimes I'll even crumble some tortilla chips or something in them also, because I like a little bit of a crunch in them. So it's kind of right down the middle for me.
That's awesome. Then if you ever come down to California, we'll invite you to have a California burrito. That would be probably the first thing we'd have to do. Yeah, I would love nothing more than to get a California burrito with you guys. Awesome. You can follow Tony on Instagram at Tony Serge, or you can visit his website. The links are in the description down below to check out more of his music. Most of your music is on all major platforms, right?
Yep. We got Spotify, Apple, Amazon. Yeah.
I was able to add it to the Instagram stories today. I was excited to hear. I heard it again, and I was like, man, I let it play for.
Added it to the playlist already.
She added it to the
on my
playlist,
phone. So
Milk and honey, yeah, man, I love it, love it, love it. But thank you so much, Tony, for taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
I really, really appreciate the opportunity to do this, and just thank you for getting Milk and Honey out there. I've just seen some new excitement on it, and it's really encouraging to me just to be able to continue doing what I love to do, that there is an audience out there that does want to hear it. So
yeah,
we're all for it. So
yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Familia, we have a question for you. Today's question of the day is, what are you being led by the Spirit to do or change in your life? What are you motivated to change or do? Let us know in the comment section down below. And as always, Familia, thank you so much for spreading the love that comes from above. And we will see you on our next adventure.
peace.
Peace.
Oops.